Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us here today. Under the SEC Chairman Gensler's leadership, Iowa, my home state, small and mid-sized businesses are being crushed by both ill-thought-out rules and increased compliance costs. This pro-Green New Deal and anti-job making rule for the SEC is just the latest offense in a long line of decisions by unelected DC bureaucrats forcing businesses to comply with unreasonable, unnecessary, in my opinion, bureaucratic red tape. I'd like to be able to see all the witnesses there and just remind that this 5,000 pages in front of me is just the start of what the SEC has done to hometown businesses and farmers in places like Iowa. It represents all the new financial rules forced on Iowa companies, and this is just in the last year alone. And with this new rule, we are adding 886 additional pages to the stack. This does not include the existing rules or regulations. By anyone's measure, this is unconscionable. This is far more than what anyone would expect for a small town or hometown business to do, and quite simply, it's outrageous. I'm perplexed how this administration thinks that businesses can thrive or even survive in this slosh and deluge of red tape in the environment. So with that, Professor White, I'd like to begin on the rulemaking and the ripple-on effects of this for capital formation. Conservative estimates suggest that an increase in compliance costs from this rule that we're discussing today alone will result in a 21% increase in how businesses back home attempt to function. Do you think this will impact their ability to stay open?
Yes.
At the very least, will it prevent them from going public?
For sure.
Could you talk to us a little bit about how you think this would impact a small or mid-sized company back in Des Moines who's going to be treated the same as a Wall Street titan?
So small and mid-sized companies that are not exempt from the provisions in this rule would have an increase in compliance costs. It's much more difficult for them to amortize those costs over their assets, whereas a very large company, even though this is a real cost, they have more assets and more ability to pass that on to customers.
Absolutely. More compliance officers, a bigger legal team, a bigger apparatus to do this. I'm just from a little farm state in Iowa, but what we grow well, we grow ag and we grow wrestlers. And I can't imagine putting a 160-pound high school wrestler in the same weight class as a 285-pound University of Iowa or Iowa State wrestler. The regulations in this environment need to follow the same aspect that we need to be able to treat different as different for a good reason and allow each to thrive in their own, in this case, weight class or own category to be successful. Mr. Wright, as we all know, the SEC's mission is to increase the ability for Main Street to have access to cash. This keeps them going. Will this rule by Chairman Gensler help with this goal to have increased access to capital?
I think no.
In fact, I would suggest that this is actually going to put America's markets at a disadvantage. Would you agree?
I agree.
Is there a solution that you would offer that could move us in the right direction?
A financial risk regulator should not be getting into climate policy and the complexities of greenhouse gas emissions. I write materials every year trying to have a more open, thoughtful dialogue about climate policy and energy policy, and maybe we should have a little more of that.
I fully agree with you. And Mr. Chair, this is one of the reasons we'll be writing a letter directly to the SEC in this. We'd love your analysis in this to really shape this in the right place. Mr. Stevens, to switch gears, I'm increasingly concerned about the SEC's disregard for cost-benefit analysis and lack of flexibility in its rulemaking. This is evident in the large number of companies that are suing the SEC now just to get clarity because they can't get through this and get any consistency in what's coming out of the SEC. For example, the SEC's stock buyback rule was recently vacated because the SEC failed to complete a proper analysis or provide justification for the rules to begin. Do you see the climate rule facing a similar legal challenge?
I see the climate rule being challenged on 3 grounds, which are the major questions doctrine, which I just discussed, the APA grounds, which is the Administrative Procedures Act, whether there's what you talked about in the share repurchase case in the Fifth Circuit. It was struck down under the APA by not having an adequate cost-benefit analysis and not showing that a real problem existed, so that will be a challenge. And the third challenge will be the First Amendment. Those will be the 3 challenges.
Team, I think this is important today, that we should not be in a situation where only the big guys get to sue and get clarity. the impact is a trickle down all the way down to every farm and business in Iowa. And with that, Mr. Chair, I thank the committee, and I yield back my time.